Hello Year 10 and welcome along to this tutorial on your mini passive amp project lesson. So first of all, I am going to review the work that you should have completed over the half term and prior to the half term. So I am using the slide deck that you all have a copy of, the template for the passive amp project, and this is the covering slide. So you can see there I've just moved on to section 1, which was the identification of a need or opportunity with a brief analysis leading to a design brief. And that was broken into a series of tasks. So there the criteria is, and you have a link to the resources. So you've got your purpose and design brief. You've got your inspiration mood board task, and you've got your site study task. Now all of that work for section 1 was due to be completed in lesson time before the half term. So that all should be completed now. I did ask you, or I did introduce you to some work on section 2. So I'm just going to skip forward to section 2, specifically to the work that I asked you to do, which was the device study, which was looking at the anthropometric data, specifically in relation to the project. So I just asked you to have a look at that data, to understand that data, and to do a little bit of research. So not really to have completed the device study task exactly, but to have had a look at that data. So I'm going to move back now to the criteria for section 2. So you can see section 2 is set out exactly like section 1. The main focus is to research into the design resulting in a specification. The specification is given to you, so you're going to do some research resulting in that specification. So a link to the resources are also here, and you can see the criteria shared with you, so you can purposely have a look at that criteria and what to include on each section in order to maximize your grade. The first task on section 2 is a client interview. So there are some questions here for you to have a look at. For example, question number 1, how much space do you require the passive amp ideally to take up in your room? You need to write a small paragraph for each of those questions, and you can also add in some additional questions for your client and interview your client. I would advise, under the circumstances of the online learning, for the client to be somebody within your own house, a brother or sister or parent. You can then go and do some thumbnail sketches, some mock-up sketches. They just need to be 2D. And you can show those to your client before the interview or at the end of the interview, and then you can write a summary of what the client thought about those ideas, and that should help focus your research and your development for the rest of the project. These design ideas do not need to be polished, they do not need to be rendered. My only advice is I would use a fine line pen so they stand out when you scan them, and you can use Evernote Scannable, the app, to include them on your side so they stand out. But they should have that rough feel. Okay, so the device study task. The device study task is fairly straightforward. What I'm looking for here is I'm looking for you to use this data and your client interview and start thinking about some development sketches that you can do as a result. The development sketches here should specifically relate to how you're going to include ergonomic data and anthropometric data in your design. So it could focus on the fact that the product is handheld. Think about curves, think about edges, think about the weight of the product, what material it's going to be made from. Try and think about the materials we have available to us and the processes we have available to us as well. So for example, you'd be looking at materials like styrofoam, acrylic, different manufacturer boards. You'd also be looking at various different processes, mainly CAD/CAM processes, laser cutting, 3D printing, multicam routing. The majority of this product is going to be CAD/CAM based. There's going to be very little of it apart from probably finishing that will be specifically be handmade or hand applied. Now, as an extension task, I'm going to move on to that actually in a second. Before I do, I'm just going to mention the design specification. So we've given you the design specification for this project. My advice here would be to read through the specification points. Your product must include, as much as possible, the following specification. The reason we've given you the specification for this project is you already know how to create a specification based on the architectural project. You had to do one for the architectural project, but we've given you one here so that you understand that specification is always a specific part of a project. There's also a brief here which you can read through prior to moving on to section 3. Okay, all of the work that I've just mentioned is more than enough work for one lesson. So I think I'll leave it there for today. I would specifically try and get section 1 and section 2 completed prior to next week's lesson, because next week's lesson is going to be very much design and development based, and there's going to be quite a bit of work in it. So this sort of fundamental work, the research work, and the early development work, try and get that completed prior to next week. Thanks very much for listening.